Men, listen carefully. If you think wanting multiple women makes you high value, desirable, or powerful, this message is for you because what you call options, psychology calls fear. Fear of responsibility, fear of intimacy, fear of being fully seen. This isn't about morality. This is about why the men who chase many women often end up respected by none. Stay with me, because this may challenge how you've been validating yourself. Wanting multiple women is not confidence, it's emotional avoidance. Real confidence is calm, grounded, and self contained. It doesn't rush, it doesn't scatter, and it doesn't need constant external validation to feel alive. A man who is truly confident can sit with himself in silence without feeling the urge to prove something. In contrast, the man who constantly wants multiple women is often running from an inner discomfort he hasn't learned to face. The pursuit looks bold on the surface, but underneath it is usually anxiety, the fear that if the attention stops, so does his sense of worth. Emotional avoidance happens when a person uses stimulation to escape self-reflection. For many men, women become that stimulation. New conversations, new chemistry, new attention, all of it creates a temporary high that masks unresolved insecurities. Instead of asking, "Why do I feel restless?" he asks, "Who's next?" Instead of building emotional depth, he multiplies emotional exits. This is not abundance, it is distraction, and distractions feel empowering only until the silence returns and the same emptiness resurfaces, demanding to be fed again. A man who avoids emotional intimacy often mistakes detachment for strength. He believes that needing no one makes him powerful, when in reality it makes him disconnected. Emotional maturity is not about needing less, it is about needing honestly. The desire for multiple women frequently comes from the fear of being fully known. Depth requires vulnerability, consistency, and accountability. Variety allows a man to stay impressive without ever becoming transparent. He can perform attraction without risking rejection at a deeper level. There is also an unspoken fear of stillness. When a man has not developed inner structure, stillness feels unbearable. Commitment slows life down. It removes chaos, and chaos is often mistaken for excitement. Many men chase multiple women because they associate peace with boredom and intensity with meaning. They don't realize that what feels like boredom is actually unfamiliar calm. Without emotional regulation, calm feels empty and drama feels alive. Women are intuitive to this pattern. They sense when a man is present but not anchored, interested but not invested. A man who wants everyone eventually feels like he belongs to no one. His attention is wide but shallow. His words sound confident, but his actions lack direction. Over time, this erodes trust because trust requires predictability, and predictability requires emotional stability. A man who cannot sit with one desire long enough to understand it cannot offer safety to another person. True confidence comes from alignment, when thoughts, values, and actions move in the same direction. A man aligned with himself doesn't need to constantly test his desirability. He knows his worth without collecting evidence for it. Emotional avoidance, on the other hand, keeps a man perpetually seeking confirmation. Each new woman becomes proof that he is still wanted, still relevant, still powerful. But the need for proof never ends because the insecurity underneath is never addressed. When desire is unmanaged, it becomes compulsive, and compulsion is never strength. Strength is choice. Strength is restraint. Strength is the ability to feel attraction without being controlled by it. A man who has done inner work does not panic at depth, does not fear exclusivity, and does not confuse impulse with identity. He understands that wanting everything is often a sign of having nothing solid inside to stand on. Men chase variety when they haven't mastered depth. Depth requires patience, self-awareness, and the ability to remain present even when excitement fades. Variety, on the other hand, offers instant stimulation without responsibility. It feels energizing because it keeps a man in motion, constantly chasing novelty instead of confronting himself. When a man hasn't developed emotional discipline, stillness feels threatening. He mistakes movement for growth and options for power, not realizing that depth is what transforms desire into meaning. A man who avoids depth often believes he is keeping his freedom intact. In reality, he is avoiding the work that freedom demands. Depth forces a man to see his patterns, his fears, and his limitations. It exposes the parts of him that cannot be hidden behind charm or attraction. Variety allows him to stay impressive without being intimate. He can remain interesting without ever being vulnerable. This creates the illusion of control while quietly reinforcing emotional immaturity. Depth also demands emotional endurance. Real connection is not a constant rush of dopamine. It includes silence, discomfort, disagreement, and moments where nothing exciting happens. Men who have not mastered their inner world struggle with these moments. They interpret emotional neutrality as loss of attraction and calm as stagnation. Instead of learning to regulate their emotions, they seek a new person to reignite the feeling they believe defines connection. What they are really chasing is intensity, not intimacy. When a man has not learned to sit with one woman long enough to understand her layers, he does not learn how to sit with himself either. Depth mirrors self-awareness. The more capable a man is of understanding his own emotions, the more capable he is of navigating another person's inner world. Without this skill, relationships feel demanding and draining. Variety becomes an escape route, a way to avoid responsibility while convincing himself he is simply wired differently. There is also an identity issue beneath the pursuit of variety. Many men attach their sense of masculinity to external validation. The more women they attract, the more valuable they feel. This makes desire transactional rather than intentional. Instead of asking who aligns with his values, he asks who responds to him. Depth requires discernment. Variety requires only availability. One builds character, the other builds appetite. Men who master depth understand that attraction evolves. They don't panic when passion softens into companionship or when excitement turns into stability. They recognize that emotional security is not the absence of desire, but the refinement of it. These men are not less passionate, they are more grounded. They invest energy into building trust, communication, and emotional safety rather than constantly restarting emotional narratives with new people. Chasing variety often looks like confidence, but it usually reveals impatience. It shows an inability to tolerate the slow unfolding of real connection. A man who has not mastered depth expects relationships to entertain him rather than develop him. He prioritizes how something feels over what it builds. And when relationships stop providing immediate stimulation, he looks elsewhere instead of looking inward. Depth humbles a man. It strips away performance and exposes intention. That is why many avoid it. Variety allows him to remain untouchable, admired, and unchallenged. But without depth, desire remains scattered and unfulfilled. A man who never commits to understanding one person fully never experiences the strength that comes from emotional mastery. Women don't compete for a man who lacks direction. Direction is not about having every answer figured out or living a perfectly structured life. It is about intention, clarity, and the ability to move forward with purpose. A man with direction knows what he values, what he is building, and what he will not compromise. This internal alignment creates stability, and stability is deeply attractive. When a man lacks direction, his energy feels scattered, and women sense that confusion immediately, even if his words sound confident. A man without direction often relies on charm, attention, or availability to maintain interest. He may be likable, attractive, or socially skilled, but there is no anchor beneath the surface. Women may be curious at first, but curiosity does not sustain desire. Over time, uncertainty replaces intrigue. When a man does not know where he is going, any woman who attaches herself to him risks being dragged into that uncertainty. Most women are not willing to compete for a position in a life that has no clear path. Competition only arises when something feels worth investing in. Women compete for men who represent growth, safety, and progression. Direction signals leadership, and leadership signals security. A man with direction does not need to chase attention because his focus naturally filters who belongs in his life. Women respond to this selectiveness not because it is scarce, but because it demonstrates self-respect. A man who wants everyone often ends up respected by no one. When a man lacks direction, his relationships become reactive rather than intentional. He responds to opportunities instead of choosing them. This creates emotional inconsistency. One day he is interested, the next he is distant. One moment he speaks about commitment, the next he avoids it. Women do not compete in environments where the rules keep changing. Emotional unpredictability erodes attraction because it forces a woman to guess rather than feel secure. Direction also communicates emotional maturity. A man who knows where he is headed can handle discomfort, delay gratification, and stay consistent through uncertainty. These traits are foundational for long-term connection. Without them, attraction remains shallow. Women may enjoy attention, but they do not invest deeply where there is no sense of future. A man without direction cannot offer reassurance because he has none for himself. Many men believe that being desired by multiple women proves their value. In reality, it often exposes a lack of focus. Desire without direction is noise. It creates motion but no momentum. Women do not compete for noise. They gravitate toward clarity. They want to know that a man's presence in their life adds structure, not confusion. Direction does not mean control, it means containment. It creates a psychological sense of safety that allows attraction to deepen. When a man stands firmly in his values, women do not feel the need to compete because the dynamic changes. Instead of vying for attention, they assess alignment. Direction transforms attraction into choice. A man who lacks direction forces women into uncertainty, and uncertainty is exhausting. Most women would rather walk away than fight for a place in a life that has no clear destination. Masculine power is built through discipline, not options. Options create the illusion of strength because they inflate a man's sense of desirability. But discipline is what transforms potential into authority. A man with many options but no structure is reactive, pulled by impulses rather than guided by intention. Discipline, on the other hand, creates direction, restraint, and consistency. It teaches a man how to govern himself before attempting to influence anything outside of himself. Discipline requires sacrifice, and sacrifice is where power begins. Every disciplined man understands that saying no is more important than saying yes. When a man constantly keeps his options open, he avoids the discomfort of commitment. He wants access without responsibility, freedom without accountability. This avoidance weakens him over time because power grows from endurance, not indulgence. The ability to delay gratification builds psychological strength, while constant choice fragments focus and drains energy. A man who relies on options often confuses flexibility with freedom. True freedom is not the absence of limits. It is the ability to function within chosen limits without resentment. Discipline creates inner order. It stabilizes emotions, sharpens decision making, and builds self trust. When a man knows he can rely on his own word, his confidence becomes quiet and unshakable. Options, by contrast, create noise. They keep a man in a constant state of evaluation, comparison, and hesitation. Masculine power is deeply connected to self mastery. A man who cannot control his impulses is controlled by them. Discipline trains the nervous system to remain calm under pressure, to stay present when things become uncomfortable, and to act from values rather than cravings. This kind of control is felt immediately by others. It communicates reliability, maturity, and emotional stability. No amount of options can replace the respect that self mastery commands. Options also create a subtle dependency on external validation. The more choices a man has, the more he looks outward for confirmation of his worth. Discipline shifts validation inward. It teaches a man that his value comes from his ability to stay consistent even when no one is watching. This internalized sense of worth is what allows a man to lead without force and attract without performance. His presence feels grounded because it is not contingent on approval. When a man builds discipline, his life gains momentum. His actions align with his goals, his relationships align with his values, and his energy is no longer scattered. Discipline simplifies life by removing unnecessary distractions. It refines desire instead of multiplying it. A disciplined man does not chase everything that excites him. He chooses what strengthens him. This selective engagement is what gives his decisions weight and his commitments meaning. Options make a man feel powerful temporarily. Discipline makes him powerful permanently. One inflates the ego, the other builds character. A man who chooses discipline understands that real strength is not displayed through excess, but through restraint. His power comes from his ability to stay focused, grounded, and intentional, regardless of what is available to him. Commitment reveals character, confusion reveals immaturity. Character is not proven through words, charm, or promises, but through sustained behavior over time. When a man commits, he shows his capacity for responsibility, consistency, and emotional regulation. Commitment forces him to align his actions with his values, even when circumstances are uncomfortable or inconvenient. It requires presence, patience, and the ability to tolerate uncertainty without retreating. These qualities expose the depth of a man's inner world far more accurately than any declaration of confidence ever could. Confusion, on the other hand, often disguises itself as complexity. An immature man will say he is figuring things out, keeping his options open, or not ready yet, while continuing to seek emotional and physical access. This form of confusion is rarely about lack of clarity. It is about lack of courage. It reflects an inability to make decisions that carry weight. Immaturity resists definition because definition brings accountability. Remaining unclear allows a man to benefit from connection without bearing the cost of commitment. Commitment demands emotional structure. A man must learn how to manage discomfort instead of escaping it. He must communicate honestly instead of disappearing. He must choose growth over gratification. These demands refine character. They expose how a man handles pressure, disappointment, and responsibility. A man who can commit shows that he understands the long game. He recognizes that meaning is built, not stumbled upon. His sense of self becomes stable because it is rooted in deliberate choice rather than impulse. Confusion keeps a man emotionally scattered. He wants the rewards of intimacy without the responsibility that comes with it. He oscillates between closeness and distance, attraction and withdrawal. This instability creates emotional exhaustion for those around him. Immaturity is not the absence of desire, but the inability to direct it. A confused man may feel deeply, but he lacks the framework to contain those feelings in a constructive way. As a result, his relationships remain unresolved and cyclical. A committed man understands that choosing one path means releasing others. This loss does not weaken him, it strengthens him. Letting go of alternatives clarifies intention. It allows energy to be invested fully rather than divided endlessly. Commitment is not about limitation, it is about depth. Through depth, a man develops integrity. His word gains weight because it is backed by action. His presence becomes reassuring because it is consistent. Immaturity clings to ambiguity because ambiguity feels safe. It postpones failure, rejection, and responsibility. But it also postpones growth. A man who remains confused avoids confronting his own limitations. He externalizes indecision by blaming timing, circumstances, or other people. Over time, this erodes self respect. A man who cannot choose begins to distrust himself, and that internal doubt eventually shows in his behavior. Commitment brings clarity, and clarity reveals who a man truly is. Under commitment, excuses collapse and patterns emerge. There is nowhere to hide. Confusion, by contrast, allows a man to remain undefined, unchallenged, and undeveloped. Maturity is not about certainty in outcomes, it is about certainty in values. A man who commits knows what he stands for, even when the future is uncertain. A man who can't choose will eventually be chosen against. Choice is not merely a decision between options, it is a declaration of intent. When a man hesitates endlessly, he communicates uncertainty, and uncertainty weakens trust. People may initially give him the benefit of the doubt, interpreting indecision as thoughtfulness or caution. Over time, however, hesitation begins to feel like avoidance. The inability to choose signals a lack of inner clarity, and clarity is the foundation of reliability. Indecision often comes from fear rather than lack of information. Many men know what they want, but are afraid of the consequences of choosing. Choice brings responsibility, and responsibility brings exposure. When a man commits to a direction, he risks failure, rejection, or regret. Remaining undecided allows him to stay emotionally protected while still engaging with possibilities. But this protection is temporary. Eventually, others stop waiting for clarity that never arrives. In relationships, the cost of indecision is especially high. A man who cannot choose creates emotional instability. His words may express interest, but his actions remain inconsistent. This inconsistency forces others to fill in the gaps with doubt. Over time, patience turns into frustration. People do not withdraw because they stop caring. They withdraw because they can no longer trust the process. A man who delays choice teaches others that their time and emotional energy are expendable. Choosing requires confidence in one's own judgment. A man who doubts himself postpones decisions in the hope that certainty will appear on its own. But certainty is not found. It is created through commitment. Without practice in choosing, a man never develops self-trust. His indecision becomes a pattern, and patterns shape perception. Eventually, others stop presenting him with meaningful choices at all. They choose for themselves, and he is left reacting instead of leading. Indecision also erodes attraction. Clarity is attractive because it reduces anxiety. People feel safe around those who know where they stand. A man who cannot choose keeps others in a state of emotional limbo. This limbo drains energy and undermines connection. Over time, attraction fades, not because of a lack of chemistry, but because of a lack of direction. Desire requires momentum, and momentum requires choice. Being chosen against is rarely dramatic. It happens quietly. Conversations become shorter, opportunities stop appearing, invitations fade. The man often believes circumstances changed when in reality, patience expired. People move towards stability, clarity, and decisiveness. When those qualities are absent, they move on without confrontation. Indecision teaches others that waiting is a poor investment. A man who learns to choose understands that not every decision will be perfect. He accepts uncertainty as part of growth. Choosing strengthens identity. Each decision reinforces self respect and builds inner authority. A man who chooses may face consequences, but he also earns trust. A man who cannot choose avoids consequences temporarily, but loses relevance over time. Eventually, life stops asking him what he wants and begins deciding without him. This entire message comes down to one truth. Masculinity is not measured by how much you can access, attract, or keep undecided. It is measured by how well you can choose and stand by that choice. Wanting many women, avoiding depth, lacking direction, hiding behind options, and staying confused are not signs of power. They are symptoms of unfinished inner work. Every theme you've heard points to the same foundation: self mastery. When a man develops discipline, clarity, and emotional structure, his life stops feeling chaotic and starts moving with intention. He no longer needs to prove his value through attention because his value is evident in his consistency. Women don't compete for men who drift, they respond to men who lead themselves. Commitment is not the loss of freedom, it is the refinement of it. A man who can choose becomes grounded, respected, and trusted, while a man who avoids choosing slowly removes himself from relevance. This is not about perfection or control, it is about maturity. When a man learns to master depth over variety, discipline over impulse, and clarity over confusion, he doesn't just change how women see him, he changes who he becomes.